Hey, it's Dimesh, Pickup Truck Plus SUV Talk, and today I'm joined by Philip Emmanuel. Am I close?
E.
Oh, darn it! I tried really hard. Philip,
Close.
and I want to preface this video a little bit. I have a little bit of an intro for this. Philip was on my comments and he was bringing up some good points. We're discussing some of the stuff with the Tesla Cybertruck, and I invited him to a Skype conversation, which I'm really happy glad he joined. So thank you for joining. And I want to make two statements very clear before you start typing a dinosaur word. I'm not anti EV. I get this stuff all the time. I would love an EV truck! Exclamation point, bold, underlined. I'd love one. I just have
Yeah.
concerns with the current EV truck that Tesla unveiled, and also have some concerns about the battery electric and fuel cell electric. And so, Philip was gracious enough to join, and I'm putting some slides that we're going to talk about here. Some background on Philip is he just told me he worked for Tesla. It helps out a gigafactory, helped do the internet there. He owns several Teslas. He owns a Tour de Country and a Sprinter van, a diesel Sprinter van. So he's got the experience of having a diesel powertrain and also having an EV powertrain. You currently own a Model S.
Hmm.
So I
Yep.
mean, you understand where this you have the understanding of the battery electric EV because you live
Yes.
the life.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I've even taken it across the country now 3 times in 6 months. So I normally spend summers in Seattle, Washington area, and then winters I'm here in Florida. So
Yeah, it's not a bad place to escape the cold. You're living the life everybody
it's
wants.
not too bad.
Right. So I thought we would start this conversation by just talking about where we ended our last comments off. Our last comments were kind of some back and forth on fuel cell vehicles versus battery electric vehicles. And so
Yes.
you brought up some good points about battery electric. So how do you see battery electric versus fuel cell?
So the way I kind of see it, and it's probably been iterated and explained better on other channels in more depth. Actually, Engineering Explained was one of the best videos that I saw explaining the difference between the two. But one of the things I know Tesla is really fond of this method is first principles engineering. So when we think of what are we trying to accomplish, we're trying to go from A to B with transportation. And we go, okay, so now let's look at the different fuel systems that we can use to get there, and how much energy can we extract from those fuel systems. And one of the things that keeps coming up with hydrogen versus pure electric is all of the conversions for the hydrogen powered systems, where you're taking natural gas, you're refining it, you're then creating hydrogen off of that, then you're then trucking the hydrogen over to a gas station, filling up a car, and then the car is taking that hydrogen and creating electricity, filling up a battery, and then turning a motor. So all of those little pieces of loss, even the loss of pressurizing a hydrogen tank, it's like again just like a punch in the side over and over and over. Here's another loss. Here's another loss. So it's like let's keep those systems. They must be good for something. I'm trying to think of what it might be good for. There's probably some specific application, but for automobiles of traveling from A to B as just residential use, it's just one of those things. I'm like, companies like Toyota, I'm like, man, if you would just put that focus and energy into your battery technology, even just your hybrids, keep pumping up the quality of your hybrids. That's better, I think better money spent, better resources spent. Um, in addition to, thinking about the hydrogen gas stations that we'd have to build out. We have a few of them in California, but to go nationwide, it's like, all right, now we're going to do the whole gas station network again. And then, you think about tanks and, having to refurbish tanks or replace tanks over time. You don't really have to replace an EV charger except for when the cable starts to, you know, get overworn and stuff like that. So that's kind of my main point, kind of I've always seen the alternative to battery electric vehicles, the argument go, let's go to hydrogen because we can fill it up really fast. And it's like, well, let's just hang on a minute before we get too crazy there, because again, with electric vehicles, we can fill them up pretty quick nowadays. 125 kilowatts is what my Model S charges at, but my parents have a Model 3 and that'll charge, I believe, up to 250 kilowatts electricity, which means my charge rate is between 10 minutes and 40 minutes on long distance hauls, and theirs is between 5 minutes and 20 minutes.
Hmm.
So.
So
Yeah.
when it comes to your argument about point A to point B transportation, this may surprise you, but I completely agree that in a car application, a battery EV makes total sense. I don't think I don't think a fuel cell Corolla makes any sense at all. I've ridden in a Mirai, and I've actually driven around a
Yeah.
Mirai, and I don't think it makes any sense. I think it's absolutely ridiculous because when you're doing a car situation, typically in a four-door sedan, quite often you have yourself. Most people drive by themselves. There's
Right.
nothing in the trunk. It's
Hmm.
pretty much empty. You don't have a whole lot of payload or capacity when you're driving around this car. Now, if you
Yeah.
drove around your sedan every day with four people, with stuff in the trunk, stuff in the frunk, I guess we call this word now, with this
Right.
frunk word. So if you were
Right.
loaded down, I think that the case for that would be a little bit different. I think your range would be different. It'd be impacted. Your charging time would be a little bit different because you'd have to charge a little bit longer to get the more of the range. And so that's when we talk about the Cybertruck. When we talk about 500 miles of range, we
Hmm.
talk about a situation where we're looking at this truck going, it's got 3,500 pounds of payload. I think at 3,700. You'll correct me below.
Yeah.
Trust me, you'll do it. But we have all this payload. And so the usage case in a truck segment is a lot different than the usage case in a car segment.
Well, I could say for the onboard capacity, I've noticed no difference in range. I've loaded up my car with like tons and tons of gear or lots of people. And I mean, if I was to see a 5% or 10% range decrease, I mean, that would be noticeable enough for me to go, oh, yeah, I was getting, 280 miles per, charge. And now I'm down to, 250. But I really don't notice that. Where I think you're probably going with this is the towing for the Cybertruck. And that's where I agree with you. That is going to be the big wall. It's
Right.
towing with the vehicles. But I think onboard storage of lots of people, lots of gear, you can load these things to the max. I mean, these cars are already so heavy that adding, that additional weight. I mean, what's a Cybertruck going to weigh? Like 6,500 pounds,
Yeah, I mean,
drive.
so there's lots of estimates about that, which I think is really
Yeah.
interesting. I think it's going to be more in a higher rate, and I got some other things to talk about that a little bit about that. Why my
Hmm.
thinking is that way, but yeah, if you tow, if you payload excessive amounts of payload, you do notice range. So
Hmm.
like in a truck segment, when guys load their trucks up with concrete,
Yeah.
they notice a difference in range.
Yeah.
And when you looked at, there's another video by our Jason who's we've referencing quite a bit. I'm gonna link to it
Yeah.
below. It's Engineering Explained. I actually asked him to do this video, and he did. There's my claim to fame. Fine, whatever. But I thought it was a really interesting video because he talks about towing 14,000 pounds with the
Yeah.
Tesla truck, and how basically it couldn't go 100 miles
Right.
without a charge. And what you're looking at is it was like an hour and 15 minutes of driving and like a
Yeah.
50-minute charge,
Yeah.
which
That's unreasonable.
yeah,
I agree. That's unreasonable. Like, I wouldn't, if that was my, if I had like a weekend boat that I needed to tow, to a lake that was 100 miles away, I would be like, well, there's no way. Like, I'm not going to tow it with an electric vehicle unless I'm going to get the Tesla semi for $250,000 and, just be balling, and show up to the lake, driving a Tesla semi pulling a little boat, you
right,
know.
right, right.
So that's not going to happen. But, for pickup trucks, it's interesting as we're speaking now, like, I was watching before the Ludicrous podcast, whatever it is. I can't remember. It's Tim Dodd and Ben from Teslanomics, and they were referencing a study done that 90% of pickup truck drivers haven't towed anything in 5 years.
Mm.
So it's like it's they treat it more like a car. So I think I probably agree with we probably agree that if you're going to use a Cybertruck like a car, it's probably a good idea. But if you're going to try to use it towing to and from a work site every single day, a trailer full of gear, like say you own a lawn care business or something, and you got to carry all of your your mowers, your big heavy mowers, and you got to go on a big 100-mile loop. It's not the right vehicle.
Yeah,
So I think we're not there yet, but
right.
it's one of the things too. Over the week, like I was saying, I got to kind of think about things a little bit from your perspective. So
Yeah, I think it's interesting. I've heard that study too, and I always find it fascinating because it's like I want to know the study of how many people have a sedan that's fully loaded sedan every time. Because to
yeah,
me, it's the same philosophy, right? So if you have a four-person sedan and one person's driving it 90% of the time, what's the
yeah,
difference between that and a truck that has nothing in the bed 90% of the time?
right. Yeah, and that's actually kind of an interesting point too. the only reason we don't have one-seater cars is everybody's scared to death to get into one of them. Otherwise we would see one-seater cars all over the place. But we all don't want to die in one of those things. So we'll get on a motorcycle, actually. That's kind of a funny alternative. But.
I think, in many ways, with the Cybertruck, I was hoping for the Honda Ridgeline type size and a battery electric. Because now you're telling customers you have limited towing, you have limited payload, but you still have the capacity, you have the availability of a bed. You still can get, sand and dirt and stuff with this thing. But it's really putting it down to shape, going, okay, yeah, this is really this customer. I think when I've talked to engineers this last week, and I've talked to different engineers in different companies, I think the fundamental thing to come back to me on is that Tesla missed the mark on who the customer is going to be for this truck. And when you look at the size, I mean, I was wrong in another bit in some comments, and I've gone back to correct that, is that the Cybertruck is actually the same size as the 5.5 foot bed crew cab F-150.
Yeah.
And I bring that up for two main reasons. Is number one, EV infrastructure, as we talked about fuel cells. I mean, fuel cells, yes, you have got to improve how you capture the hydrogen. I mean, right now the losses are crazy. And you have got to improve the infrastructure. Now, fortunately, there's natural gas all over this country. There's natural gas lines running all over this country. So you could tap into those pretty easily. But still, splitting the natural gas off and getting hydrogen still is an issue. But so we could do an infrastructure pretty fast. And in the video I did with the Semi, they actually bring in these long tubes of hydrogen and park them. So it's not such a big issue there. But what I'm going with this, and I'm going to let you talk in just a second, is that the size of the Cybertruck is going to be a concern in two ways. First of all, the EV infrastructure is really built for cities at this point. Yes, there's an east-west highway, if you don't know. There's actually a Tesla charging station like 45 minutes from me in Lusk, Wyoming. It does exist. Tumbleweeds are around it mostly, but it does exist.
I bet you I've gone through it.
Yeah. So, I mean...
I blew out 2 tires going through Wyoming.
Right. So there is an infrastructure for it. However, it's usually for in-town driving. Like LA is a great example. There's lots of charging there. Yeah. And so now you have a very large vehicle that you're going to have to get in these spots and tow and plug in with. And driving, I've driven full-size trucks, 8-foot beds in downtown Denver, and I've driven them in Montreal, and I've driven them in Detroit. I'm not such a fan. That's a lot of vehicle to drive around. And I read these comments, and they're like, oh, I live in LA, I ordered 2 of these things. And I'm like, where are you going to drive it? And secondly, they like to charge at home. Well, we've had an ongoing problem in the truck world for about a decade now, where the full-size trucks have gotten so large they don't fit in garages. And before people bitch at me about this is actually a real issue. And there's a company in Detroit, Michigan, that their entire business is enlarging garages. They go into your old 1940s house and they enlarge the garage because garages weren't made for those trucks. And so that's why the mid-sized truck market is blowing up so much, because it's the right size vehicle for that customer. They can park in the garage with stuff. So every day, right now in the winter, I go outside and I plug in my 62, because if I don't plug him in, he ain't turning over. He hates winter. He's not a big fan of winter. And I have an extension cord. And when I was looking online with Tesla, they said no extension cord they didn't want it. You can do outdoor charging. It's a really interesting thing.
Well, I was going to say, how far away are you from the building when you charge?
I park right next to my garage door, so I run the cord underneath my garage door and actually run it out to the truck.
So, but the nose of the truck is probably sitting pretty close to that.
Yeah, I park it as close as I can because I don't want to run a 40-foot, because with electricity, the longer you run the cord, it drops.
Yeah. So you could install, if you were to have a Tesla vehicle or something like that, you could install an external charging right on that wall. You just tap into the, maybe even just the electrical for your dryer or something if that's nearby, or run a separate circuit. It's pretty cheap to do. And I remember that comment of yours. You were saying, "Oh, I hate plugging in every day," and I'm like, "Yeah, but come on, like that's not your main argument against driving an EV." And I don't.
No, it's not my main argument. It's like last night I landed at 9:50 at night, or got home at 9:50, and I had taken 3 flights for some dumbass reason. I don't know why I did that, but I'd been flying since noon, and I landed, and I had to immediately on the way home from the airport. I was thinking, "Got to plug in my truck. Got to plug in my truck." Right. So my wife picked me up. And what's interesting, and I bring this up, and it's not just from me, is that every time I get a diesel truck, and we'll segue a little bit, but every time I get a diesel truck, the ranchers come up to me all the time. They always want to talk about it because it's we use a lot of diesels in my part of the world.
Yeah.
And the first fundamental question they always ask me is, do I have to still plug it in?
Mm-hmm.
And if you notice, like the new Chevy heavy duties, they actually have a plug-in spot by the bumper. And this is a real issue in colder climates, is that during the cold part of the year, you're always plugging in your truck. And
Right.
it's kind of led to the rise of two things, is that the always plugging in has become an issue. The price of diesel has become an issue. And so we do a lot of side-by-sides out here. Because
Hmm.
a side-by-side is like the right size, still got some payload. You just hop it and go, hop it and go, hop it
Yeah.
and go.
They're
And,
gas.
yeah, and so it's like, and from my aspect, it's like, and I've gotten some crap about this, and that's fine. I can take it. Is that I have a lot of electrical components in the house, and a lot of things to plug in, and I got a family and mortgage and stuff, and I have to plug in my truck, and man, I don't like it. I don't. I've had a, and I have driven these vehicles, and people give me crap about this too. I'm not a Tesla hater. I think Musk
Right.
has done an amazing job with the company. He's really shaped the automotive market in a certain way. He's really moved stuff. I have driven a Bolt. I've had it. I've driven it in a Boulder. I have driven a Model S. I have had a Mitsubishi Outlander thing, a plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, and so
Okay.
I've had these plug-in with small battery packs,
Yeah.
and I had a Volt before they killed the Volt, and frankly, I just stopped plugging them in because I just didn't the benefit of it and the hassle of it. I just didn't like it. I wasn't a
Oh,
fan.
yeah. For the hybrids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I've had the hybrids, and I had the Bolt, and I didn't have the Bolt for the loan because they can't physically bring me the Bolt without having a trailer, because I'm just outside the range of the Denver office, and they
Yeah.
can't quite get it to me, and so it doesn't and I don't have the audience for it.
I was gonna say for the plug-in hybrid experience, I feel your pain there too because those things are kind of crap and they don't have much range on the battery anyway. So you're like, you feel like you're just trickling like the tiniest amount of energy into the thing. It doesn't feel like you get much for the time spent doing that. So I understand. Like I had a Prius and I was just like, yeah, there's no way. I'm just
Yeah,
it's just not worth it. So I feel your pain there. It is different when you have like a Tesla with a lot of range and you plug it in, and the next morning you have a full tank, and you're just like, cool, I have 250 plus miles of range, and I'm good to go. And the car is already warm. I'm going out in the morning, and the car is warm and ready to go.
sure.
That's a whole different story. And I think actually I know we hit a couple points here. If you don't mind, I'll go back.
Yeah, yeah, please.
So for the truck size thing, are you saying that garages are too short or they're not high enough?
Too short.
Too short. Oh, okay. Yeah, so that wouldn't help with the Tesla truck. I know the one cool thing I do like about the truck, and I think other truck manufacturers should do, is create that suspension system. I don't know how you feel about it, but the air ride system that'll lift and lower the truck and tilt the bed
Yeah,
and stuff like that.
so
I feel about
it's interesting. There's a lot of innovations that people keep saying it's
Yeah.
brand new innovations.
Yeah.
Folks, we have had air ride suspension for like a decade now. Like it's
Right.
nothing new. Ram has offered it for years and years and years. And
Right.
the new Rebel has it, and I drove with it and used it off road, and I did the off road mode, and did the aero mode, and I did this stuff. And the new Ram pickups actually have it where you press a button, and the back of the
Mhm.
truck actually lowers enough so you can get the ball in there and then raise it up. I mean, it's a cool
That's
thing.
cool.
I mean, people
Yeah.
have done this for years. I will tell you that it's not a huge take rate. There's not a lot of excitement from
Right.
truck guys around it because air suspension. One of the difficulties you have with that is it's a little more complicated, right? One more, and for truck guys especially, this we feel very strongly about this. It's one more thing to break. You'll hear that all the
Yeah.
time with truck guys.
I
And
agree.
when I had the Rebel, frankly, I spent more time forgetting about it and trying to remember to press the button than I did elsewhere. It just because the Rebel was so high already, I often forgot about off-road mode. I know there's people that are very keen on that and they will do that. So like the Land Cruiser has it, LX570 has it, the Toyota Sequoia and the Platinum package actually has air suspension. The Ram has it, and it hasn't been a huge take rate in truck world because it's a solution to a problem that doesn't always exist.
That's true because for the Tesla, when I was shopping for it, they had models with the air suspension, and I was like, I don't really want air suspension. I had air suspension on my GMC Denali, and it started leaking, and it was expensive to fix, so I just would deal with hearing the compressor going off every 10
Right.
minutes, repumping it back up. So I feel you on that one. That kind of makes sense there too. And I want to roll back two more topics where you were talking about the hydrogen and methane. One thing that kind of really bothers me about methane, more than whatever, the air pollution and things like that. That's a thing. But my biggest concern is actually our helium reserves. So helium, I don't know if you're familiar.
Yeah, I've been reading some stories about this. There was a helium shortage, and people were all
Yeah,
sad because Susie's little birthday party would be all screwed over by not having
yeah.
balloons.
I
But
just
I mean,
tell
it was a real issue. But yeah, they made some
Yeah,
jokes about it.
I always tell people, I'm like, fill your balloons up with hydrogen. It'll be a more exciting party,
But
like
The
make effort.
Hindenburg, right,
Yeah,
right.
but helium is an element that we can't produce here on Earth. So we can split water and get hydrogen, as much hydrogen as we want, but we can't get helium. Once we take it out of the ground, we need to store it somewhere. And if it's released into the atmosphere, it'll eventually make its way to the top of our atmosphere and then gets lost to space. So when people talk about non-renewable resources, I tell them, I'm like, oil is more of a renewable resource than helium is. So let's be super careful about how much helium we let go. So that's also kind of going back to the fuel cell vehicles. I'm like, I know they're taking methane and every time they pull out methane, then they're releasing helium and trying to figure out what to do with it and trying to sell it and store it and stuff. So my biggest concern actually with all the fuel cell things about the fuel isn't really the carbon footprint. It's more the helium, delicacy, delicate nature of it. And thinking really far into the future, like, hey, 1,000 years from now, 2,000 years from now, I don't want people to be needing to run their MRI machines and they don't have, helium,
Sure.
which is the best element for cooling available. So,
Yeah, I definitely think.
anyways,
I think in both cases, I think in a battery electric case and fuel cell case, there's definitely challenges. I mean, both of them have big challenges. I mean, in a battery electric case, we need a lighter, denser battery to last longer miles and handle more towing. In the fuel cell case, we need better energy capture, and we need the infrastructure to be. The infrastructure to me is easier to build out than electric infrastructure would be, but it's still
you
billions of
think?
dollars. Yeah, because
What?
so what? I don't know if you got this on my video when I did the semi drive in the port of Los Angeles. So if you don't know the backstory here, I'll give you a little backstory. Is that
Okay.
Toyota has what's called a Project Portal, and they have taken a Kenworth semi and they took two Mirai powertrains and built into this semi. And the idea is in the port of Los Angeles and port of Long Beach, that's the most polluted part of the United States. And the reason for that is they have drayage trucks. Drayage trucks means they drive to the port to pick up a load. They drive 15 miles. They drop the load off. They go back and forth. They run. There's an interstate out there. I'm sorry, I don't remember the interstate number, but you put it below because I know you guys love to comment on this stuff. But there's a famous interstate out there. They drive back and forth, and they just driving back and forth this interstate, right? And so I was there. Actually, I asked Toyota to fly me out there. So yes, Toyota paid the whole way, all kind of stuff, whatever. But I went because I was really curious about how this is going to work. Because I'm really curious on, I hunt, I fish, I golf, I play an absurd amount of golf, but I'm always outside, and I really want the environment to last. I mean, I have a vested
Yeah.
interest in last, and I think ranchers and farmers have the same vested interest. What I was out there
Yeah.
was that is that the communities there have large instances of lung cancer, and the reason for that is they have the bay, the highway, and then
Yeah.
housing and schoolyards. I saw kids playing in the schoolyard with semi trucks going right past them, diesel powered semi trucks.
Yeah.
And just imagining the particulates in the air that are causing these kids. I mean, clearly these kids are having cancer. That's what's going to happen. And so what they've done is over the last, I don't know, 10 years, I think it was, the state of California has done a lot to ask automakers to come in, and they've had huge grant processes to build an alternative powertrain that would work for these drayage trucks. They've tried battery electric, and what they find with battery electric is these drayage trucks drive back and forth 40, 50 times a day,
Nonstop.
whatever. And and what they do a lot is they spend a lot of time idling. That's one of the big concerns. Is they spend a lot of time idling for wait for the next ship. So it's a chicken and egg, right? So the ship pulls in, unload the cargo container, load the semi drives over, comes back and forth. But the drayage trucks like line up, wait for the next one to come off the board. And
Right.
so they've passed like no idling laws, but the truck drivers, well, it's 95 degrees out. The sun's baking on
Yeah.
your head. I mean,
Yeah.
it's a bad situation. So they found with battery electric, they just couldn't handle the load all day long. And then charging them, the charging times were so long, they literally would take a truck out of production for a half day and have to store it, charge it, and then swap truck, and just the cost of that. So what Toyota said was, let's try hydrogen in this case, because when a hydrogen truck, the semi truck Project Portal stops, it's a battery electric truck. It runs off the battery, so there's no
Right.
emissions there, and you can the fueling times are they're trying to get it down to the same fueling times as a diesel would be. So they have a massive tank in it, so they're trying to get the same fueling times. And so the idea is you can drive this truck from the port back and forth all day long without emissions. You can let it idle, and then once at night, they're finding the usage ranges. Once at night, they just go over and they put hydrogen into it.
Fill it up.
Yeah, and Toyota's actually building one of the. They kind of backed off this word, but they at the time they called it the world's largest hydrogen fuel cell station, fueling station. But they've kind of backed off because who knows how you measure it and square foot yardage, all that kind of stuff. But they have they're trying to get about like 20 to 30, I think the number was, fueling bays for hydrogen semis, and they've been working with Kenworth is involved in this. I think there's a Panasonic, I believe, is one of the other ones because of the battery technology is involved in it as well, and Toyota's involved in it, and Toyota's spending quite literally billions of dollars to create these semis and create this fill this need for the city, the area of California.
Yeah.
That would be a huge environmental benefit to the area. And once they can figure out how to remove the emissions from those ports, the entire grade of air quality in California goes up exponentially because it's really that one situation that causes the problems. And so
I think that's a great example of the ideal case for something specific.
Right.
That sounds great. Yeah.
Yeah, and so what I did in that trip was I talked to them about that, and then I talked to their leadership team, and they actually have one of their top engineers right now is working on developing hydrogen fuel cell powertrains for every vehicle in Toyota's lineup. Because the same philosophy holds if you do that same emissions thing. You can do the same philosophy for like the Tundra. I've said for a while now that the Tundra won't go diesel. There's some green footprint issues and some green emissions issues that Toyota corporate and globally just won't do. They just don't believe diesel is a really good environmental partner to the community. It's just the way that the emissions are from a diesel engine. And so they're looking at hydrogen fuel cell. The government actually in the Defense Department has a hydrogen fuel cell Chevy Colorado. It's actually one of the most badass Colorados you've ever seen because the same idea is that the military could take this Colorado and drive out in the middle of a desert, and they would have a refuelable fuel source, so they could bring in a hydrogen fuel truck, right, and plug them in. But they'd also have EV battery power in remote places.
Efficiency.
Right, and so for that standpoint, that's where the fuel cell makes sense. I believe, I'm a huge believer in that there's going to be a range of powertrain options, and that's going to suit consumers. I was thinking that, VW, when they were talking about doing some different hydrogen and different things, I was thinking, if you could take like the Passat and you make a gas version, a diesel version, a battery electric version, a hydrogen version, a solar version. I don't know, but the same vehicle with multiple. You just go to dealer like I want the blue one and I want that powertrain.
Yeah, it's so expensive though because even like Subaru, I remember I petitioned for Subaru to get a diesel engine for because like I was saying earlier before when we were speaking, my family always tried to stick with diesel. We were just like we know it, we love it, and that's the hard thing is for these auto manufacturers to have multiple options, have multiple engineering teams, to have multiple assembly lines, part suppliers, things like that. It's so cost prohibitive.
I mean, it'll never happen. I think it'd be cool, but it'll never happen.
It would be cool. In an ideal world, I wish one company would specialize in each so that you could, they'd go, hey, we're the kings. If Toyota wants to be the king of hydrogen, go for it. If, some other, company wants to make natural gas engines, go for it. Just to stay focused in what they're doing.
Yeah, and so I can tell you, I went to Japan and I talked to the engineers about hydrogen over there. I wasn't able to video it because, well, frankly, it was myself, a translator, and an engineer. Yeah. And I was trying so hard just to think about my questions, and it was one of the most difficult interviews I've ever done in my life. But they were telling me that the Saudi government actually has approached Toyota on their hydrogen fuel cell stuff because the Saudi government understands that oil is a finite resource, and they need to develop a multi-pronged energy solution to keep the kingdom loaded, keep the money in the kingdom.
I know. Yeah, so keep that money.
Right, so they're working on a solution. So I think that's that's where I get excited about fuel cells because when I think about a battery electric vehicle, and you've road tripped across the country, so you probably have some experience on this. And there is a video on this channel where a guy in Australia was road tripping in the back country of Australia in a Model S, and I published the video, which I lost some subscribers. Nobody watched the damn thing. But anyways, my point of view on publishing the video is that he speaks specifically on how he's able to map out sites to charge and understand range and charge, and how, well, basically he's retired. I mean, that's the only way he could figure out how to make multiple days in doing this across the country. And you've done cross-country trips, and you know that there's, can it be done? Absolutely.
Yeah.
Is it easy all the time?
Yes.
Do you think so?
I would say yes, absolutely. So here's how it goes, and it's so strange. It's almost like I want to let you borrow my car and be like, dude, just do it, and then tell me how you feel about it. You know, maybe when I roll through, when I go back to Washington, I'll stop in. I'll give you my car for a week. I'll be like, just enjoy it, driving around.
Sure. There's a guy in that's 20 minutes from here that has a Model S.
Yeah. So how it works for me, and it's super crazy. So I used to drive the Sprinter van, you know, across the country doing road trips, all fun. And one of the biggest things for me was driving fatigue. You know, staring at the road, and then when you stop driving, you're like, it's almost like you still feel like you see the road passing by you. So with the Tesla, I have autopilot, and when I map out my route, the route planner on my screen will say every single charging station that I'll stop at and how long I'll stop there for. So it'll say, your next one you're going to stop at for 10 minutes. So then I'll go take a pee break. And then the next one maybe will be, it's a bigger gap to the third charger. So the second charger is going to have me stop for 40 minutes. And I go, okay, well, I'll have lunch, and it usually works out to be driving for 2 to 3 hours, and then pee breaks and meals are always, in sync with that process. And then having the autopilot going, it's just, I'll be honest, totally honest. Sometimes I'm just losing focus of the road, and the car is doing all the driving, and I'm just relaxing. But it helps so much with fatigue that I really don't even mind going cross country. And sometimes I arrive places, and it feels like I arrived way before I should be getting there. Like coming down to Florida, it took me a couple days, which I didn't mind. It took me essentially 2 days. But the drive was nice. It was even over Thanksgiving weekend. It was supposed to be crazy.
Right.
When traffic is surrounding me on a road trip, I'm actually happier because the car has more points of reference. It has more data to say, hey, here's my prediction of where the road is. Here's my prediction of all the obstacles around me. And it definitely brings the stress down. Whereas before, it used to be when you manually drive, the more cars around you, the more stressed you are. So you wait for open road and then you feel stress-free. For me, actually, now open road is a little bit more stressful because a pothole can come up and I'll never see it.
Right.
Because I wasn't paying attention enough. And that's why in Wyoming I blew out 2 tires because I had those stupid 21-inch rims with the ultra-thin tires, which I didn't want in the first place, but I had to get it. And then I blew out 2 and spent 2 nights in, I don't know where it was in Wyoming, but nice little town, super friendly people.
Sure.
Yeah.
So I think there's 2 points to that I think is very interesting, and truck guys take note of this, is that on a road trip, yes, you have the charging stations. I've seen the video on this, and trust me, I've spent a lot of time watching Tesla videos last 2 weeks.
Yeah.
And it does work for road trips and things like that. I think what the use case for a truck's a little bit different. So like my truck, I may drive 10 miles a day. I may drive 300 miles. Every day is different for me, and I think for a lot of truck guys, every day is a little bit different. And when you have a truck, you have a tool, and sometimes you need the tool over here, and sometimes the tool sits in your box for a week. I mean, it's a different case. So I think with truck guys thinking about, you got to think this stuff through a little bit more. Yes, you could spend an entire week with your battery plugged in, but when Tesla talks about cars and things, they're really looking at the fact that you're looking at your commute, you're writing down your commute miles, you're writing down your commute time. I mean, so you're really planning stuff out. For a truck, it's a lot different thing. I think there's some adjustment to your lifestyle for an EV vehicle. It may not be a high mark for some people. Some people may be a huge jump. Some people could just be, I'm driving 20 miles anyways. Like my wife, I tried to get her to buy an electric car because she drives 10 miles to work and gets a fleet vehicle. However, we have snowfall. We got lots of snow. The ground clearance in electric vehicles isn't high enough. And there are some days she takes her own car. So some days she'll put 300 miles in the car. Yeah. And some days she'll put 10. So it's a little bit different case there. I was just thinking the autopilot. You've brought this up in some emails and things. I think what's interesting here is autopilot is really actually a bad marketing term for the suite of services they provide. So it's additional driving technology. So I looked this up, and Tesla says autopilot is lane centering, auto change lanes, adaptive cruise control, basically auto emergency braking. All right, so those features are found throughout the lineup these days. I mean, automakers have been offering these for a couple of years now. So I absolutely. What's that?
Have you tried them in the other cars?
I have. I've tried them in all the cars. I've tried them.
You like the GM Cruise and the
Cadillac Cruise? Yeah, I mean,
Cadillac Cruise.
Yeah. I haven't done a Cadillac. Cadillac can't quite spell Nebraska, so they don't bring vehicles to me. But I've talked to my colleagues who have done that, and I've tried all these technologies, all these cars. I actually drove a Subaru to Denver once. I never touched the brake or the gas for 3 hours.
Did you do the steering wheel one?
Yep.
The steering assist?
Yep. So a lot of people call that lane departure assist. And every brand does it differently. So like Chevy will vibrate the seat and nudge you in. I just did the CX-30. The CX-30 will actually nudge you over, but they still allow you to go over the line as long as the inside tire doesn't cross the line. So if there's a bicycle on the road, you're not going to swerve into the bicyclist real fast. I mean, so I've done the same autopilot technologies.
Right.
Most brands call them self-driving technology. They're not self-driving, but they call them, there's another word for them. Like Nissan's got Safety Shield 360. Toyota's got Safety Sense P. I guess so, but I agree with you 1,000%. And I've talked about this in the channel quite a bit. I used to do a podcast talk about all the time. Driver fatigue is a huge issue, and this is a huge issue. Yeah. Right. And so self-driving technologies that not self-driving technologies, because it's not autonomous driving. That's the biggest point to make. It's not autonomous driving. Those driving safety aids. That's what safety aids. Those safety aids make a huge impact on road trips and fatigue. My neighbor just got a new Blazer. He drove to Omaha, and he goes, I was so awake, I wasn't tired.
Yeah.
You know, so I'm like, so I guess my point with that is that I think in the comments I've read on different videos, people get really hung up on this idea of autopilot. Never had to drive myself. No, you still have to have a hand somewhere in the steering wheel or still be paying attention because those systems can run into weather issues. For example, I had a Ram truck 2 years ago, and I couldn't back it up because the sensors were iced over. I couldn't fly to Denver last week because the sensor was iced over, and the maintenance guy showed up a mallet and just beat off the ice. I mean, you know, those things do happen. I think the end result of self-driving aid technology is we're all just going to wash our trucks more often because you get dirt on there, and the cameras can't see. It's a camera system. So, but I was surprised. I was shocked by this. I looked it up, and I was shocked by this. The base price of the self-driving technology was $3,000. However, you had to have the full self-driving package to get the additional self-driving autopilot feature. So it's $8,000 according to Google. Now it's $8,000. Before it wasn't $8,000. Now as you step up, that's the current pricing. And Toyota's free. Toyota's standard. Nissan standard.
Well, it's free with the Cybertruck for the basic full self-driving package, which is, you know, it'll drive down the road, autonomous and things like that. So I guess I'll give you some clarity. There's enhanced autopilot.
Right. There's a base.
Full self-driving.
Yep.
So enhanced autopilot will drive you down the road, autonomous. It'll keep the lane. It'll stop and go in traffic and things like that. Full self-driving is the $7,000 package additional, which will drive from A to B with no driver input whatsoever. So people are paying in advance, like, you know, myself, my family, we all paid in advance for that feature, even though it's not out yet.
Right, because I want to be very clear on this. We're talking about autonomous versus driver safety aids. So driving down the road, it's lane departure assist, which basically the camera views the lines in front of you, and it keeps you between those lines. Adaptive cruise control actually uses a sonar. There's a sonar below your emblem on the front of your Tesla that sends out a sonar going forward, and it matches the vehicle speed in front of you. So I get very careful with autonomous because there's a thought process that I'm just going to press a button, the car is going to drive itself all the time.
Right.
And that is not here. It's not legal at any state, right? And so there's a lot of there's a huge learning curve. Basically, the technology is not there yet.
Well, and that's an interesting point because I let people drive my car all the time. And one of the biggest things that I have to tell them is this will not stop for stop signs. It will not stop for red lights.
You're right.
And also there could be edge cases that this car doesn't know about yet because it hasn't learned everything in the known universe, of possibilities. So it's still learning. I think there's somewhere over 10 billion miles of learned data so far, but that's still not enough for them to say that they feel like it's perfect. And I don't feel like it's perfect. It is interesting, though, every single month that I get an update for the car, I can actually feel the confidence increase. So there's certain curves, like near my home in Washington, that in the beginning of the summer, it could not handle those curves, but now it can. So
right, yeah, it's a learning process. I have a friend who went on a multinational trip with BMW. They were driving their cars in Africa to develop the self-driving technology, autonomous driving, because the street signs in Africa are a different color than they are in the United States, and so the sensor is actually a black and white sensor, and so working on trying to figure out how the sensor is going to pick up the color differences in Africa versus Europe, and they're working on strategies for the GPS to know actually where you're at and what the laws are in your area, because every state in the country and every country is a little bit different. So it's interesting because it is coming, but it's the whole thing about battery electric is the same thing as autonomous vehicles. It is coming. We will see electric pickup. Stop writing dinosaur. Just hit the backspace. You don't want to write that. It is coming. I believe it is coming.
The electric.
But
the electric's coming.
Yeah, it is coming. But there's multiple challenges to overcome. But it is coming, and I've said this in different videos, and I want to get to one other thing too. Is a couple of more points real fast. Is that I think it's interesting that you and I've talked for 40 minutes now, and we haven't talked the 0 to 60 time on the Tesla Cybertruck, and yet people point that all the time. Well, look, guys, we've had sports truck before. We had sports trucks in the early 2000s, as you recall, the Ford Lightning, the Cyclone. We've had sports trucks before. They don't exist now because the marketplace is so low, and now you cannot go to a single manufacturer's website and see 0 to 60 times, because it's not that big of a thing for the truck world. I know you're excited about it. It's a sports car. That's a truck. That's a Cybertruck. I have concerns about the safety rating. So like people don't realize is that front end is like this, and so we have a lot of pedestrian crashes. Are now the majority of crashes in the United States, and so when you get a body going like this hitting that front end, the head's going to snap, and your spinal column will actually break, so you actually die. And so, you die. Spinal column. That's how it works. Anyways, so there's a lot of safety concerns we've been raising in the media, which are very valid concerns. I just had our discussion yesterday in the airport with a gentleman who's there's a lot of talk about lasting for life. These cars will last for life. Electric vehicles will last for life. Yeah. And that is true. Replacement of battery, because it's like our cell phones, right? They charge and the battery eventually goes bad. There is something that to keep in mind in all this stuff is that the more technology you have in the vehicle, the more difficulties you're going to have for long-term reliability based on copper wiring, because copper wiring does corrode over time. I have a 62. I've had to replace all the wiring because the wiring goes bad. The engine still runs great, but the wiring goes bad over time. So keep that in mind. And plus, everybody says when they buy a new car, it's so funny. You've had this too. You buy a new car, they say, I'm going to have this the rest of my life. And 4 years later, you're like, you're not. That's such a...
2 years later, you're looking.
So here's some statistics for you. The average car shopper shops, again, in 3.5 years. 3.5 years, trucks are 5. So I think those are interesting points because I've gotten some feedback on that. But yeah, I think there's...
The hand-me-down, though, the hand-me-down effect where you can hand it down to your kids, and things like that. If you maintain it and take care of it and you feel like it's a safe vehicle, that kind of, we've had a lot of vehicles in our family that have kind of transitioned through, even though I don't feel like having the same car anymore, another family member wants it. So we'll kind of rotate or do whatever. But
it is interesting because so far statistically, the resale value on EV cars has been terrible.
You think?
It has. Statistically, it's been terrible.
I don't know. I thought the Model S held its value better than any other luxury sedan.
Yeah, but luxury sedans are notorious.
Well, that's the category it lives in. But I would agree that like the Nissan Leaf, or things like those,
right?
The non-actively cooled battery electric vehicles, I would agree. Which is actually funny because I owned a Nissan Leaf. I bought it used for $7,000, and I owned it for 3 years and then sold it for $7,000. So you got to get rid of that initial hit, and then you can pick it up for real cheap. Like my Tesla, I picked up for 44. So it was originally 95,000 4 years ago.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
So I think there's a lot. Again, the marketplace is still too young. I brought this in the
yeah,
video, and I've talked about this a few times. Is before we get so excited about this Cybertruck and how it's going to change the world, let's understand here that, electric vehicles have always been in a single digit category as far as total sales for the entire market. So right now we sell about 17 million units in the country each year, month to be great, but every year. And vehicles have accounted for about 3% now. They've increased. They're about 3%.
yeah,
And so if you look at the math, if you take like 2.5% against the 3 million light duty truck sales we do every year, you're
hmm
looking at about 75,000 units. I messed up my live stream. I'm going to correct it in this video right now. That's 25%. My numbers are off. But anyways, so you're looking at 75,000 units annually for EV trucks. Now, Tesla owns 77% of the EV marketplace. So if they keep that 77% up and you have 75,000 units, they're going to 50,000 or so. I mean, that's kind of the math, right, in that range. And so you're looking at about 3,000 to 4,000, maybe like 4,000 trucks a month would be kind of what they're going to sell.
sweet spot. Yeah,
But keep in mind that next year, within the next 2 years, by the time the Cybertruck launches, we should have 7 electric trucks in the marketplace.
yep,
So we have 7 competitors going for 75,000 units, and if Tesla owns that, we're gonna have 6 competitors going for 25,000 units.
right,
You can't do that.
right.
Company
You know
that's
what's
not enough volume
interesting?
for
Though?
companies to make money.
I think a lot of those. I think there will be new people entering the pickup truck segment, though. I think you're going to have a lot more followers in the years to come when people are like, well, you know what? I used to not own a pickup truck because a lot of people. Do you remember when the gas shot up to $4 a gallon from $1 a gallon, and everybody got rid of their big vehicles, and now SUVs and things have come
Mhm.
back. I think with electric pickup trucks, people are going to be like, all right, I'm going to go get one because it's not going to kill me to drive from A to B and
Right.
expensive. It's only going to be, $7 to fill it up in electricity equivalent. So I think you're going to bring a whole, large mass of people back into the pickup truck market. So
And
I
I
don't
think
know.
that's a great point. I think it's great because I've had some discussion with my colleagues about that. Is that the Cybertruck's not for a traditional truck guy tip overall. I mean, there are outliers. I've heard some outliers here and there that still ordered one. I always think it's funny, like I bought one.
Yeah.
No, not really sure. But anyways,
No.
but I think there's a non-traditional truck buyer who wants to get back to the marketplace, and that's where I was like, thinking that the Cybertruck should be more like the there's a new Hyundai. It's like a Hyundai Santa Cruz. It's basically a Santa Fe with a bed. It's like the old El Camino kind of idea. Is that you
Okay.
have a unibody pickup, and you're gonna have like
Yeah.
a 4-seater unibody pickup, a small bed, a small size. It's built off a small car platform. I think that's
Yeah.
ideal for a lot of people,
I
a lot of
know, but
non-traditional
I,
truck guys.
I kind of want the Cybertruck more than that, though. Like I feel like I don't know. I feel like I'm gonna have more fun with the Cybertruck,
Sure.
like because it's freaking huge.
It is. I think that's people don't
It's
understand.
gonna be like an H1. It's gonna be like owning. Everybody wants to own an H1. I don't care what you say. If you had one and somebody gave it to you for free, you'd be like, "This is cool. I'm driving it around." I feel
Yeah.
like that's what the Cybertruck is gonna be for me. It's gonna be like, it's cool. It's unpractically huge, and it's a lot of fun. And yeah, I think
It's going to
that's
be interesting. I can't wait to see what the real world comes out on that because it's going to be Raptor fast, right? So the sport truck fast. It's going to feel like a Raptor off road, and it's going to be driven like a Raptor off road. The challenge with it is so long that you're going to have. I'm really curious what the breakover angle is going to be. So if you've ever off roaded, they have approach angle and departure angle, but the breakover angle is really the key. And so because you
yeah,
have such a long vehicle going over something, how
yep,
much of an angle you're going to have to go over that point. And I
yep,
was really I was disappointed in. Let me be very clear on this. I was very disappointed in Elon Musk's presentation of what the truck market is, and I found it somewhat
right.
insulting. And I was disappointed we didn't get more important specs to me. How far can you tow 14,000 pounds? What is the breakover angle? What's your GVWR? What are I want to know these numbers. And so I'm really
It's.
curious to see what happens with people.
I was gonna say it's Silicon Valley nerds building a pickup truck. That's what it was.
That's what I
You
said in
know,
my video, man. I got some. I had to actually
that's
stop
true.
reading the comments because I said, it's Silicon Valley that has a viewpoint on what me in Nebraska wants, and they didn't talk to me. They just said, "Oh, you just need this. You're dumb."
Yeah, exactly. I think it would have been good if they would have had, consults, and then even just giving input, more and more things, those small minor details, or even if they would have, I mean, I guess time is always the enemy of everyone, but to go out and spend the time and experience, day-to-day life, of what the needs are. But I got to say, I bet you 99.999% of these Cybertrucks never leave the pavement. So
Yeah.
that's, I mean, I feel like the breakover angle is going to be like the one dude who tried to get on, he bought it in California. He's like, I'm going to take it to the Rubicon Trail, and then he gets hung up on a rock. And,
Oh yeah, that'll be the YouTube sensation, right? It'll be like
yeah, it will
5 million views in like an hour, right?
Yeah.
It's gonna blow up. I have heard that before. There's a guy who's done some that has been arguing with Doug DeMuro about this. He says that the Cybertruck is going to be about 5 more minutes. It's gonna be a SEMA thing. People are gonna love it at SEMA, and they're gonna lift it, add bigger tires on it, add lights on it, add paint to it, and he thinks it's gonna be awesome. I'm thinking, well, wait a minute. The SEMA builders get given a truck for free. That's how the system works. Is that if you're a SEMA builder, you typically get sponsored the truck, you get sponsored the gear. All you're doing is you're the designer and the gas monkey guy. You're putting this stuff on there. But I always find it fascinating that you can do all the stuff to it, because in physics world, once you add more rubber to the tires and make the tires bigger, you have more resistance. As you add paint, you add more weight. As you add more lights, you add more weight. And so you're taking this electric vehicle and adding a bunch of weight to it.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's the opposite of what the plan is, and that's going to really just cut down the range.
Well, that's a good point too, because we've seen that in the past where people, those car modifiers are like, we're going to make a performance Model S, and you're like, okay, what are you going to do to it? And they like put plastic fenders on it, and you're like, how'd you make this better?
Yeah.
They really didn't get anything out of it. So
yeah, I just find it interesting, because like when they do that, those builds and SEMA builds are typically diesel engines, because diesel can handle the weight, as you know, and they typically retune the diesel and they put a different rear axle on. That way they can actually handle spinning the tires. So I can't wait to see a Tesla, Cybertruck, like on the battery to go, as it's driving to Vegas. There'll be like charging stations along the way, because I don't know. I just find this all fascinating. What people's
I think
perceptions
you're
of it.
Overestimating the effect of having weight inside the vehicle. It's really not that bad when you already have a vehicle so heavy that the percentage of weight that you could possibly add inside, it doesn't really kill it that bad. It's only that towed weight, that is. I mean, I could be totally wrong. Maybe I need to, do the math on it, and see. Maybe I'll go load up my car with a couple thousand pounds of, rock, and see what the hell happens.
I'd be really curious, because I know in my gasoline engines that I'm saying my gas, like I own them, but anyways, in my truck that I've used, is that I do see a significant loss in efficiencies when I'm hauling, and because of the additional weight. And I do know that one of the things that comes in the truck world all the time, that it's an ongoing joke. You get a forum, you get a newbie on the forum, and he's like, dude, I lost all my fuel economy. I lifted it, put tires on it, and I put the lights on it. It's like, why did I lose all my fuel economy? And the first comment everybody says is, take all your crap off, enter.
Right.
Because all that stuff impacts the physics of it. So it definitely makes a big impact in the truck world, because of the physics of the vehicle, and being aerodynamics are so bad on a truck, right? So a truck's a box on wheels. It's a terrible piece of aerodynamics.
Yeah, and I could be doing the old, driver bias, where I'm just saying, oh, it doesn't affect it at all, because I remember back in the day too, I used to be part of like a hypermiling forum, and everybody would just lie about how many miles per gallon they were getting. I was like, I don't think that's physically possible, so I could be deluding myself on that point, but it would be a good experiment. I should try to load it up.
It would be. So before we end this, did you order Cybertruck?
3 of them.
You ordered 3 of them. So tell us, what did you get?
So I actually ordered 3 of the mid-range, the dual motor mid-range. So I got one for myself, one for my brother, and one for my parents.
Okay.
Just as, I just did the pre-orders for them. It was funny, when the Model 3 came out, I ordered pre-orders of those cars for my business partner and my parents, and essentially forced them to go get it.
So why did you go from the mid-range, not the single motor or the tri-motor?
So I felt like, if they're coming out with 300 miles of range versus 250, I was like, all right, it does kind of help when you're on the highway to be able to skip one of those superchargers. Sometimes you can extend it out further, and then you're like, all right, I'll drive for 3.5 hours instead of 2. I'll just hit that, next point, and I'll just do a long lunch, wait 40 minutes at, whatever restaurant is there. And I figured, the same for my family. Also, my biggest complaint for my parents, they have the Model 3, it's a rear-wheel drive, and they're okay with driving it in snow, but, they feel more comfortable in an all-wheel drive vehicle.
Mm-hmm.
So that, and then my brother, same thing. He commutes from New York City to upstate New York. He's a firefighter, and he said in the wintertime, if the snow is too bad, he just really feels more comfortable in all-wheel drive. So I was like, all right, 3 all-wheel drive, Cyber trucks, and it'll be they're commuter vehicles. All 3 of them are commuter vehicles, and weekends, go get some, stuff at Lowe's, some plants or, plywood or whatever. So, but I'm hopeful too with that ramp. I think I do want to get like an ATV or a dirt bike or something like that. That'd be fun.
I'm really curious to see long-term durability studies on that ramp, because it's one of those things that automakers have tried for a long time, and they haven't been able to successfully make work because of the additional weight you have in that tailgate. Because the people don't understand, that's a lot of weight in that tailgate. And you open and close that multiple times, and the lifespan that automakers make for stuff is that they want stuff to last for a long time. Mm-hmm. Against what people say on the internet, automakers do care about that stuff. And so I'll be curious to see what happens.
That's what I was going to say, actually, before when we were talking about it. I was going to ask what you thought of the tailgate, and I was curious why haven't other automakers done that. And then also I was kind of curious why Tesla didn't make theirs electric, so that it would like electronically go up and down to help offset some of that weight. But I don't know. I don't really know much about tailgate technology.
Yeah, so I mean, there's 2 main issues in that bed that people didn't understand. Is that the sides, those are called buttresses. We've had those buttresses since 2000 or something, when the new first generation Honda Ridgeline came out, and we've done that aerodynamic before. The challenge with that is, and the reason for that is, that buttress goes up, meets the cab, and they bolt them together. And the idea is it's a unibody frame, and it's monocoque frame. I'll say it more specifically. And so what happens is you need that joining piece, because as you add weight to the bed, the truck wants to go like this. As you go over a bump, the truck wants to go like this, right? That's how it wants to turn. And so they bolt that stuff together, that way it doesn't crack. Yep. So Ford in the 1960s had a monocoque F100. They built this truck, and it was going to replace the body on frame. What they found was the twisting motions of physics and people loading up the bed, they were cracking the trucks.
Gotcha.
And so that's why that buttress is so large. It's not an aerodynamic thing, and people said that it's not. But the con to that build is, and you're going to find this when you have your truck, is that right behind the bed right behind the cab, between the bed and the cab, so right behind that cab, I call that like the no man's zone. Mm-hmm. All your crap goes right to that spot, and you can't get in because your only entrance point is in the back of the bed. So imagine that. So all your pots and plants you want to put towards the front of the cab, they all slide up there. I don't care. You could tie strap. You could glue these damn things, bolt them down to the bed. They're all going to slide forward. It happens all the time. And so you always get in. So the new Chevy Silverado, for example, the heavy duties, have a step now before the wheel, so you can hop in the side of the front of that cab, because there's always those issues. Especially if you can go a fifth wheel and a gooseneck. When you hook up a fifth wheel and gooseneck, the power cord comes out of where it hooks to the ball basically in the bed. And so you have to hop into the bed after the trailer's on to plug it in. And so with old trucks, I did this. You actually have a tailgate down, and I have a bit of a belly. And I have a bit of a challenge crawling into the bed and belly crawling in to plug in the trailer. That's why a lot of people leave their trailers hooked up, a fifth wheel and goosenecks, because it's such a pain in the ass. And so that new step gets in there. So now you have a problem with the Tesla bed, is that you can't use a fifth wheel or gooseneck. It's impossible, because as you turn with this fifth wheel, as you turn, you'll crease the sides of the buttress. You can't make a left turn with a fifth wheel. So the other problem you have is your access to the side of that bed is now gone. Yep. So the new Honda Ridgeline that we've seen that has came out a couple years ago got rid of that buttress because it was people didn't like it at all, and it became such a problem for consumers who own the truck because you can't get in that spot. What they did was they put a big piece of steel behind the back of the cab that's got these fingers that go out that connect to the back of the bed, and so they reinforced that the best they can. But they also made the truck smaller, and they made the payload smaller. That way, people weren't overloading the bed, because if you overload the bed in the Ridgeline, it's going to go like this. It's going to snap. And so that's one of the issues you have with the Tesla. So now imagine this, where you have this built up, and now you have a tailgate that goes down with some metal on it.
Yeah.
So now you're extending the physics points. You're moving this way back, and you're adding additional weight on that ramp as you're pulling down a truck like this. That's why actually the air suspension is basically really needed to reduce those angles and reduce the load going on, so you can drive on easier and get it on there. But I have some real concerns with people loading that tailgate up with a lot of stuff, because it's like I tell people, we have discussions about all the time. Basically, if stainless steel was such a good metal option, automakers would have gone with this years ago. They learned with the DeLorean that it wasn't a good option, because the DeLorean actually was fiberglass with a bit of stainless steel on top, because stainless steel was so expensive. And to get that toughness that Buzz talks about, it's really expensive, and it's hard to and people say rust proof, but go Google stainless steel fridge rust, and you'll find a bunch of kits on how to fix it.
Well, the reason stainless steel fridge rust is because they don't use enough nickel in them. I looked that up.
Right.
So cheap stainless steel, they skimp on the nickel, and then it ends up rusting. And a magnet is a good way to test.
Right, and you can still accordion builds up as well, and so it's water deposits on stainless steel. It causes an issue too, but invariably it's a metal, and all metals rust. It's just what's going to happen with it. But,
right, that's true.
Right, and so when you have the stainless steel, and you have this tailgate, automakers have tried for years different stuff. So like Ford actually has this. They have a step in their tailgate, and the step comes out and goes down, and they have a little ladder thing. It's like, to me, I call it the king's like. Because you're climbing the bed. So they actually have this, and that's about as much weight as they can add to that tailgate without wearing out the hinges. And so when you add that much weight into the tailgate, there's really some long-term issues. One of the benefits that Tesla has is they're a startup. They can try a variety of things, and if it doesn't work, doesn't matter.
Yeah, just switch it out later.
Right, and switch it out, not a big deal. For Ford, GM, and Ram, they're not a startup. They have to have the requirements. It's going to pass so many codes, and they got to hit their long-term reliability. One thing was interesting was, I was a little side note. I was doing the Colorado Bison ZR2, which is or AEV, which is a joint venture between American Expedition Vehicles and Colorado and Chevy Colorado team. And I was talking to Dave Anderson, who's the owner of AEV. They used his stuff in that truck, and he told me he was blown away. Absolutely blown away at the amount of testing they had to do before it came to market. He said from his own standpoint, he says, I test a lot, but he goes, it was incredible, the testing that we do. And so I attribute AEV similar to Tesla in that their testing isn't not as much. It's not a bad thing, guys. Don't give me the hate over this. I'm not saying it's a bad thing.
No,
it's just startup. It's a startup brand versus a established brand. The reputations are different.
And Tesla has more of a motto of a rapid failure, more like their SpaceX, also owned by Elon, motto of let's, fail quickly and then figure these things out. And, when you're a company like Ford or GM or Dodge, you produce so many vehicles, you can't afford to have all of those vehicles coming back to repair an engineering mistake on some brand new design, that you went. You decided to just like on a whim, create something cool, unique, and who knows if it was going to fail or not. They can't afford to do that. But I think Tesla, it's interesting. If you look at the Tesla Model S and then the Tesla Model S refresh 2 years later, there's so much change between those cars internally, even though the external looks different. I think you're going to see the same with the Cybertruck. The Cybertruck that I pick up in the beginning is probably not going to be, they could even revamp the whole thing and 2 years later go, yeah, that first generation Cybertruck, we don't make that anymore. We have the new Cybertruck,
Right.
So I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. That's why I think my approach with myself and my family, since we're, we don't use it for work or anything, these are just big cars for us.
Yeah.
They're big toys. But I think it is a good point for people that, are in the profession. I don't think it would be safe for them to, gamble like that. I think it would be safe for them to maybe wait it out, take a look, maybe even if one of their work trucks, a lot of times I have business owners that own trucking companies, construction companies, and some of them, just the foreman or the, supervisor, they'll have a truck, and it's nothing special. It's almost like a car that can go off road, essentially onto some dirt roads.
Sure.
So I could see that maybe being a good, testing ground. Also police vehicles, things like that. So yeah, different applications, but I could see, if I was like a rancher or, somebody who needed, heavy duty, and that was like my lifeline, I would not probably, purchase the Cybertruck as my replacement. But
yeah. I think there's I heard a guy who said he had an F-350. He's going to trade it in for the Cybertruck, and he was going to tow his camper.
F-350.
Yeah, and I was a little bit like, I didn't respond to him because I was confused by what he thought the capacity of his F-350 was. But people do different weird stuff. I was in Hawaii once, and a guy told me that he traded in his Tacoma for the Ram 3500 1-ton 6.7 liter Cummins diesel engine because the Cummins was faster off the line. That was his purchase reasons.
Okay.
I understand. I had nothing for that guy.
Well, you know what's interesting too. I mean, I'm down in Florida right now. Sometimes people drive F-450s just because they liked the way it looked and they picked it up, and that was, you know, a lot of times we bring these psychological things when we were a kid. We played with a Tonka truck and we're like, all right, I want that as an adult. Yeah. So they buy it and it never sees anything, towed behind it, and it's never carrying any load besides groceries. And maybe that's the F-350 guy and goes, I'm going to get a Cybertruck because then I feel, buys into whatever I want, in my next generation of vehicle. So whatever, we're all different. We all got our own motivations, but it is good it was nice speaking with you and learning about some of the things, especially that I didn't know about, especially with the design and even, hearing about the hydrogen trucks down in LA.
Yeah.
All cool stuff. I think it's all really cool. So.
Yeah, I think, like I said, eventually someday it'll all come to fruition. We'll have one good thing. And I like we said offline, the tech guys are coming to the truck guys, and truck guys have been arguing about functional reform for a long time. We've been arguing about fuel economy for a long time. We've been arguing about emissions for a long time with DEF usage. We've been arguing about this stuff, trying to make the trucks better. And for us, new generation of trucks are phenomenally better than they used to be. But from somebody who's been in the marketplace in 20 years, they see them as the same thing. And so I think there's a lot of learning both sides. I had to learn a lot about Tesla, and I'm sure you've learned a lot from me. And so there's a lot of learning going cross-learning on it. So
yeah, and I think there's still a big gap that we need to make. I think one of the biggest pieces is battery technology needs a 4x improvement before it's a comparable one-to-one, apples-to-apples system. Yeah. So I think if we can get 4 times the energy density, then we'll be able to have a good conversation about, whether or not it's a full replacement. And I think that would help too with, design of traditional truck designs where you have 4 times the density. Then, we're talking 1,000-mile ranges without towing, and then we're talking about 250-mile range if towing. So I think that would be more doable.
Yeah,
and faster charge times.
I agree. All right, so if you've enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like, hit subscribe, click the bell, all the kind of stuff you need to do these days, because that's how social media and that's how YouTube works. I'm sure comments will go crazy, and stop writing dinosaur. I'm not a dinosaur. I'm old and cranky. I'll take that all day long. That's fine. Make sure you find us on pickuptrucktalk.com. 3 words again, Pickup Truck Talk. Made it really simple. It's on the hat. It's on the website. It's all that kind of stuff. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram. Do a lot of funny memes and stories on there. Make sure you check that out. As always, thanks for watching. We will see you down the road.